They were so close with their brother Lazarus. And they knew that Jesus loved him too. Why didn't Jesus just say the word from where he was? And Lazarus could have been healed before things had gone too far. He'd done it for the daughter of Jairus. She is not dead. She is just sleeping, Jesus said. He'd done it for the ruler's son. And he didn't really even know these folks. But Lazarus was far more important to Jesus than either of those people. At least, that's what Mary and Martha thought. How could Jesus have let this happen to his friend? Well, I'm sure you're familiar with the truth that God sees things differently than we do. After a full day's journey, the messenger came to Jesus to tell him about Lazarus, and Jesus was about 20 miles from Bethany. And the messenger leaves the next day to return with the message from Jesus. When Jesus heard that, he said, "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Lazarus was already dead, and this was day 2. And Jesus waited 2 more days before coming to Bethany. Where are the disciples in all of this? They're right there beside Jesus, wondering yet fearful that if Jesus goes to Bethany, he and they could end up being killed. The authorities were just waiting for the right time to arrest Jesus. And Bethany was only 2 miles from Jerusalem. And it was almost time to celebrate Passover. Jesus was not waiting where he was for Lazarus to die, but he was on a divine timetable. You know, the divine timetable and the human timetable, and how we always think that somehow God ought to work on our timetable. But he doesn't. Thank you. This was not the last miracle of Jesus before his cross, but it was the one no one could deny. Not even the Jewish leaders. You see, if Jesus could do nothing about death, then whatever else he could do amounts to nothing. 1 Corinthians 15:19 says this, "If in this life only we have hope in Christ, we are men the most pitiable." The sisters were strong in their faith, but Martha didn't want to wait until the resurrection at the last day to see her brother again. That was way far in the future. So when Jesus told her she would see her brother again, he was thinking immediately. She was thinking future. And those around the family were thinking past. If only he'd have been here, he could have prevented the whole thing. Just the day before, they prepared that body. And they had done the shroud according to the law, which was, the cloth was twice the length of the body. Half went under, half went over. They tied the feet, and then they tied the arms and secured them to the chest. A separate cloth was used for the head. Okay, you got the picture. Stand like this, or laying like this. This was not the ruler's son or the daughter of Jairus. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. He'd been sealed in the tomb by a large rock. Martha was the sister that was always on the move. She went to meet Jesus, and as Mary rose to run out the door a little bit later, she had followers, mourners, that were following her because they wanted to show their support. Remember, back in those days, there were professional mourners. They might not even have known Lazarus, but they were coming to wail. She meets Jesus. Mary meets Jesus with Martha. And by now, everyone knew that Jesus was coming to the family. Many had gathered, including the Jewish leaders. Imagine the scene. Wailing and moaning and hugging and disappointment and fear for Jesus' life, and yet so glad to see their friend and their Lord. Jesus wept. Was it because he was too late? Did he weep because his friends were in such anguish? Or was it because Jesus knew what he was about to take Lazarus from? The very hand of God. The very presence of the Father. Bringing Lazarus back to this world of sin would only mean that he would have to pass through death again. The Lord's weeping reveals the humanity of our Jesus. Isaiah 53 says, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. But the glory of the Lord must be presented for the faith of these people that had gathered, for the strength of the disciples, and to honor the promise that Jesus had given to Martha and Mary. It's been said that if Jesus had not called Lazarus by name, that all the tombs would have been emptied. I have a little bit of issue with that. I'm sure that there were lots of people named Lazarus back then. Just like there's lots of people named Glenda, Bob, Mike. So I think that that's kind of a way that some folks try to insert humanness into this process, into this miracle. But let there be no doubt, this was a miraculous event. For Jesus Christ was totally in charge. They argued about how the body would smell. But finally they rolled the stone away. And what does Jesus do? He pauses to pray. And then he says, Lazarus, come forth. He says it in a tone that's a command, not a wish, not a thought. Lazarus, come forth. In my mind, I imagine Lazarus all wrapped up, his feet and his hands bound, and shuffling or hopping out of the tomb. But luckily, details aren't the important part of this whole story. Perhaps God ushered him out. Because remember it says, Jesus said, loose him and let him go. So he came out just as he had been, all wrapped up. Can you imagine the emotions running through that crowd? Fear, amazement, joy, wonder, dread, anxiety, astonishment, and surprise. And you see them backing up and going, oh my goodness, what a moment. You think any of those disciples were thinking, what has he got us into this time? And then there was Lazarus. 4 days dead, Lazarus. Oh, Pastor, we've heard this story so many times before. What is your point? Well, the Bible says that we were all dead in trespasses and sin. Right? And it also says that there is forgiveness in Jesus Christ. So come forth. God is saying to us this morning, Glenda, come forth. use your own name. Hear your own name as Jesus calls you to come out from what you've been hiding behind, from what you've been covering up, or that you have pushed way down deep inside. And just come forth for Jesus. Unbind the parts of you that you're still holding on to, and come out of that tomb that you're holding yourself in. There's a book entitled A Forgiving God in an Unforgiving World. It's by Ron Lee Davis, and it tells the story of a priest in the Philippines who carried a burden of a secret sin that he committed while he was in college, in Bible college. And he had repented, but he had no sense of God's forgiveness. In his church was a woman who claimed to have visions in which she spoke to Christ. And he would speak with her. To test her, he said, the next time you speak with Christ, I want you to ask him what sin your priest committed while he was in Bible college. And the woman agreed. So a few days later, when they met up, the priest said, well, did Christ visit you? She said, yes. Yes, he did. And did you ask him what sin I committed in Bible college? And she said, yes. Yes, I did. Well, what did he say? She said, well, he said, I don't remember. Jesus never half forgives us. He forgives the whole person, the past, the present, and the future. Come forth. Forgiveness is already yours.